Okay guys, welcome back. In this lesson we will take a look how to filter S3 buckets using AWS tags, and we will use Boto3 client, Boto3 resource for doing this. As usual, we will cover everything using Moto3 library unit tests. So let's get started. First of all, let's, as usual, create a separate subfolder for our examples. Let me click new folder and call the folder filter buckets by tag. Okay, and first of all, let's go to Boto3 documentation and take a look if we have anything for the filter. It looks like we do not have any meaningful way to filter S3 buckets for tags or by tags, right? So what we can do, we can basically rely on the list buckets method, which will return us a list of buckets, and then basically let's go back to the documentation and take a look what do we have in terms of AWS tags. So instead of searching for a list, let's search something for a tag. And what I would like to do, I would like to go to the client and do the same thing. Here we go. We have a separate method for delete bucket tagging. That's not what we are interested in right now. And we have a API method which gets bucket tagging, right? So it looks like to solve our problem, I mean filtering S3 buckets using tags, we need to rely on this specific method. So basically we will get a list of buckets, we will get tags for every single bucket, and then we will walk through a list of tags returned by this method and implement the filtering logic in our source code. So sounds not very complicated. Let's go ahead and start doing this. So what I would like to do to save us a little bit of time, I would like to take an already existing code base from list buckets client and paste it here, rename the file a little bit, like not the list, but filter buckets client py. And now let's take a look what kind of changes do we need to make here. So first of all, this script will filter, or let's use the word search S3 buckets by tags by tag using S3 client. Cool. So now we already have a list buckets using client. Let's rename the method like filter buckets using client, and probably we will need here a tag key and a tag value. So let's use them as variables, tag key and tag value, right? We will use this tag key and value to filter buckets using the information provided by these variables. Okay, cool. So now we already getting a list of buckets here. That's good. So now we need to create a separate list for filtered buckets. Let it be an empty list. And what we're gonna do next, we will walk through a list of buckets or bucket in buckets and let's define this buckets variable. Buckets will be this list of buckets returned by the list buckets method. Let's go back to the method definition. And take a look. We will walk through this list items and basically get the bucket name from here, right? As we did it from in the previous example. So for bucket in buckets, and as soon as we I'm getting a bucket name, right? Like this. Now we have an information about the bucket name, and now we need to query the information about the tags, right? And let's go back to the documentation. Let's go to the client. Let's search for the tag. Once more again, get bucket tagging. That's the exact method which we're gonna use. And let's copy it and do something like bucket tags equals then S3 client and then our get bucket tagging. And let's take a look how we need to use this method, right? So this method accepts a bucket as an argument, and we'll paste it here, but instead of string, we will use our bucket name here. Okay, now as soon as we have the bucket tags, let's take a look at the actual response. So we are getting a Python dictionary which contains a tag set key with a list of tags, right? Okay, so let's define this tag set over here, and basically we will get a list of tags in this variable. Now what we need to do, we need to use a for loop for tag and bucket tags. Now we are walking through the list of tags, and all we need to do is just to compare the tag value and tag key with an arguments provided for our method. So it should not be so difficult. First of all, tag key. Let's do it a little bit different way. So basically, let's define a method, like not a method, but if condition. Now tag. So let's take a look in the documentation. As soon as this gonna be a tag, the tag key will be available by the key, and then equals the tag key provided as an input for our method. And now we need to do the same thing for tag value. And compare it with the tag value. Okay, cool. Now, if that condition is true, we need to filter it, use filtered buckets array, use append method, and for the append method, we will use a bucket name as an argument. So basically we will add the bucket name to the filtered buckets list if the tags specified for this specific bucket are equal to our tag key and tag value. Now, as soon as we found this bucket, we don't need to walk through the entire list of tags, and probably we can break the for loop execution. Let's think about it for a second. So first of all, what's gonna happen if there are no keys and values? Probably we will get an exception here, right? So it definitely makes sense to use a try catch block and let's put all this code in the try part. And as an exception, Boto3 library has a special exception which is provided to us by Boto core library, right? So we need to import this exception. This exception name is a client exception. So let's import Boto core exceptions. No, let's import Boto core. And within the exception, we will use Boto core exceptions and then client error as E. So what it gives to us, it allows us to get an access to the actual exception message if E response and here we get into the error, and with an error we have a code, and for that specific get buckets tagging method, we may get an exception which is called no such tag set exception. And if that's what we are getting here, let's ignore it. Basically, what we are doing here, we are trying to get information about the tag set for the bucket. If the bucket has the tag set, everything's good. We are validating tags one by one. If you found something, we are adding the bucket to the filtered buckets list. But if there is no tag set and we are getting no such tag set exception, sorry, we are just skipping this exception, and that means that there are no the bucket just does not contain any tags. And as a result, we are returning a filtered buckets list. So that should be it, I guess. Now what we need to do, we need to take the name of the method, replace it here, and search for bucket by the tag key and value. So I'm not quite sure which tags do I have here. Let's scroll down. Let's take a look at one of the buckets which I have, and let's go to the properties and take a look. So I have tags set up for this specific bucket, and I have a tag key project which equals to hands-on cloud. So let's try to do it and use it for filtering operation. And let's copy hands-on cloud over here. So now I'm expecting that as a result of the script execution, we should get at least one single bucket which contains, which satisfies our search conditions. That's okay. Now, as usual, before running our code in real environment, let's go ahead and test it. So what we're gonna do, we will take this file paste it here. This test contains a test case scenario for listing our S3 buckets, and we will slightly adjust it to satisfy our today's example. So this script tests filtering S3 buckets method, Boto3 client using moto library. Cool. Next, let's rename the test class. Let it be test filter S3 buckets unit test case. Okay, we are using S3 client. That's good. Now moto mock decorator will stay here. Next, test not create S3 bucket, but test filter S3 buckets using client self. And now what we're gonna do, we're gonna take our method name from our code base and import it from this file. Let's take the bucket, take the file name, and here we go. So now the logic will be the same. So if we will use this method when we do not have any buckets, right, we should get an empty buckets list. And let's try to search for random key and a random value. Okay, so the error should disappear, and this condition is true. Now let's create a couple of buckets, and for every bucket we need to add tags, right? So let's scroll up to the top of our Boto3 documentation, go to the client, search for the tag once more again, and find the method for setting up tags. It's not get, it's not get. Here we go. Put bucket tagging, and this method sets tags for a bucket. Let's scroll down. There are several exceptions which this method might produce. We will not take care of all of them, but if you'd like, feel free to implement the try catch blocks by yourself. So what we're gonna rely on here is on the actual method signature, and let's take a look. So first of all, we don't need checksum algorithm, we're not gonna use it. So for the bucket name, we will use bucket1 here. Next, tag set, this will define a tag for us, and then expect bucket owner, we don't need it. Okay, so next we need to replace the client with a self S3 client to get access to our internal class S3 client. Okay, and now we are ready to set up tags, right? So let's specify something like project, and here we go. Let's use the same project name, hands-on cloud, and for another bucket, we will set up a different bucket name and a different project name. Let's capitalize the project. To make it look similar to what I have in production environment, right? And probably we don't need any response from this method, just because we are not using any information as an output. Okay, so basically we created the buckets and populated them with required tags, right? Okay, now what we need to do, we need to scroll up, take this example, and use it here. But now what I'm gonna do, I will use these specific conditions to check that my method returns me an exact bucket for every single condition. And for hands-on Cloud 1 project, it should return bucket 2. So everything else should stay the same. Fine. Now let's go ahead and check how everything's working. So let's call Python and S3 examples, S3 lessons, then filter buckets by tag, and then call something like test list buckets client UI. And here we go. Our test passed successfully. Now we can try to filter my real environment buckets by the conditions which are specified in the script. So now let's call my script. Not test, but filter. And here we go. As we can see, we successfully found my single S3 bucket, which has this tag key and exactly this tag value. Cool. What I found here is that basically I need to rename this test file and instead of list, specify filter. Cool. So we just implemented a filtering of S3 buckets using Boto3 client. Let's take a look how to do it using Boto3 resource. So as usual, let's duplicate the file, and instead of using a client in the file name, let's use resource. And let's close these unnecessary methods, and let's do the following thing. So first things first, let's take list buckets examples, and let's take a resource example which lists S3 buckets. I will copy the entire code base from here and paste it here. Now the script lists or searches S3 buckets by tag using Boto3 resource. Let's rename the method from list. Let's use filter. So filter buckets using the resource. We are using the resource. We are getting buckets iterator from the S3 buckets collection and all method. Now we need to adjust this example just a little bit to filter the buckets again by ourselves by the specified tag key and tag value, right? So let's add the tag key and tag value as a method arguments, and create an empty filtered buckets list, right? Now, let's return filtered buckets list. And now we need to basically use a for loop to filter our resources, right? So what we need to do, let's first of all walk through the list of buckets for bucket in bucket iterator. And now we will use the similar logic, right? So we will use a try catch block where let's go to the client and copy, let's go to the filter buckets client and use this except part over here. So again, if we will not find any information about the tag set, that's okay. We don't care about it. And now let's try to query the tags for every single bucket, right? So to do that, we need to go to the documentation, take a look at the service resource, and find something related to the tagging. So here we go. We have a bucket tagging, and let's take a look if we have something related in the bucket class. And yes, we have a sub resource which is called tagging, right? And we will use that sub resource to get information about bucket tagging. And this is an example how we are using it. Let's copy it, go to our IDE, and this bucket tagging object will contain information about all the tags related to our S3 bucket, every S3 bucket in the for loop. Now let's take a look how to process this information. So basically we need to get access to the tag set, and tag set is a list of dictionaries of key and values, right? So what it means for us, it means that basically we need to use a for loop like tag in bucket. Let's rename it to bucket tags to make it more clear. In bucket tags, and then we need to use pretty much the same for if condition. So let's go ahead, copy it here. So basically if tag key equals tag key and tag value equals tag value, then we are adding the bucket dot name, just because we are interested in the bucket name only, to the filtered buckets list. And here we go. Now let's take a look what exceptions do we have here. Yes, we did not import Boto3. Let's do it. Import Boto3. Here we go. Now the last exception which we need to fix here is to use the correct method, and like in our list example, let's use the same parameters. Here we go. And this code should return us the same results as we get from the filter buckets client py script, right? But before doing this, let's actually implement the unit test. Now Let's duplicate our file and rename it. Test filter, buckets, resource. And make necessary changes here. This script test filter in S3 buckets method, Boto3 resource, using moto library. That's cool. Instead of the client, we'll use S3 resource, Boto3 resource. So now we are relying on resource. Okay. Next, we need to import the correct methods. Let's open the resource file, copy the correct name, and change the file name here. Next, let's change the method in the method name in the test class. Instead of client, we'll use resource here. And now we should replace the method name in the first condition, test condition. So basically, again, we should get an empty list. Here, next, we will use S3 resource to create bucket, like bucket 1. Next, we will use S3 resource here. And now we need to set tags, right? So to set tags, we need to use a tagging class as a remember. Let's go to the documentation, open the service resource. We saw it already here. Let's go to bucket, actual bucket class, then take a look what we have as a nested resource. Nested resource has tagging, and it actually allows us to use a put method, which will again produce several exceptions. Feel free to catch them and process them by yourself if you need to. But overall, this is how we are setting tags to the S3 bucket using the resource. Let's go to the code base and paste it here. Let's fix the indentation. Let's remove the checksum algorithm. We will use tagging. We don't need expected bucket owner. And this will be the tag set for our bucket. And this is going to be bucket tagging, right? So let's think about it very quick. So what's important here is that what we need to do. So let's change the bucket creation process. And instead of using a create bucket, let's define it like bucket. Then remove this keyword from here. Let it be bucket 1. And then within this bucket, let's go to the bucket. Let's go to the tagging class. Let's use tagging class. And within this tagging class, let's use put method, right? And that's exactly what we are using here. Let's remove it, and here we go. It should work. Let's remove this client definition. So here for the tag key we'll use keyword like project, and for tag value we will use something like hands on cloud. Okay, now we will do the same thing for bucket 2. And for the project name, we will use hands on cloud 1, right? Now here, let's use the correct method name and replace incorrect ones. We should get the same results, right? So we just created bucket 1 with this tag and bucket 2 with this tag, and again our filter bucket using the resource method should return pretty much the same values. So let's test it out and see if we did not make any mistakes in our code. So Python S3 license, then filter buckets by tag, and then test filter resource. And yes, we have an error here, right? So what it tells to us is that, first of all, an error occurred when calling put bucket tagging operation. The specified bucket does not exist. So probably we have a mistake in our code, and let's take a look where we have it. Test filter buckets resource py line 30. Let's go to the line 30. Okay. Okay, cool. So let's check it out once more again. We are using S3 resource bucket 1, right? This should create a bucket. No, it should not. Why? Because basically this is just only a definition of the bucket, and then we need to go to the bucket and use create method to actually create the bucket, and probably that's why it complains right now. So let's make similar changes here. Oops, let me to close this and paste the bucket equals S3 resource bucket, and let's call bucket create method. Now it should work. Let's go ahead and execute our test once more again. And now we have another error, like S3 bucket object bucket tagging is not iterable. Okay, that's easier. So it looks like we did something wrong in our filter bucket resource py line 20. Let's go back to the code base, scroll down to the line 20, and yeah, it looks like the data structure here is a little bit different. Okay, let's take a look. So bucket tagging, so bucket tagging will return us bucket tagging, and of course we need to get access to the tag set over here. Tagging, and as soon as we are getting access to the tag set, the buckets tags will store the tag set information, and right after that everything should work. Let's check it out once more again. And there we go. Now everything works as expected. Again, unit testing using moto library allowed us to fix all the issues with our code even before executing this code in real AWS environment. Now let's execute the script itself and check that we are getting the same results. Python S3 lessons, filter buckets resource. Let's clean the screen, and here we go. We are getting the real S3 bucket from a real AWS account, which satisfies these search conditions for AWS tag. Thank you for your attention. See you in the next lesson.